Hey everyone, it's Connor back from This Old Farm, and today we're out here at the farm. It's well, dark out as you can probably tell behind me, but doesn't matter, we're inside the shed here. And today we've got ourselves quite a project on our hands. If you saw our post, one of the posts that I made on the community tab of the channel, we got the M Diesel put into a shed that we put a concrete slab into. Oh, it was like 2 years ago now. We never sat down. We never finished the shed. We have to build a what they call a knee wall for the bottom side there. But for now, I just set down a couple of concrete cinder blocks, and actually the front is kind of. The reason we have to build a knee wall is because where this garage originated from, the foundation of it was higher than what the front of the door went down to. So that's why that is. So the front's sitting out. But anyways, that doesn't matter. What matters is that there behind me, the M Diesel. We are working on splitting this. For those of you that don't know or are rather new to the channel, we have a rear main oil seal leak, which means that these engines have all engines have a crankshaft that runs through them. It's what your pistons and piston rods and that connect to, and it basically is what causes or makes the engine run. Besides the pistons, if you didn't have a crankshaft, you wouldn't have an engine that would turn and spin and all that. So on either side of the crankshaft, there's what they would call seals, oil seals, which keep the oil in your engine, which lubricates your engine in the engine. There's a front one and there's a rear one. Our rear seal is leaking on the crankshaft, and this tractor has always had a oil seal leak. It's always, just about falling over here. It's always had a constant little drip coming from the back, but it was not. If you filled up the tractor at the beginning of the day, you'd be able to run it all the way through the day, and it would be just fine. It would be down to about the add mark by the end of the day. Well, this year the seal must have really finally dried up and finished off, and you couldn't keep a full, I don't know what you want to call it, full oil pan, whatever. You couldn't keep it full of oil, the tractor full of oil, and so this tractor had to sit on idle alongside the Super M this year. I shouldn't say on idle. It sat on the farm doing. Sorry, I keep tipping you guys down every time I look away from the camera. It had to sit and do nothing this year, and it was really kind of annoying, we'll say, because this is normally our square baling tractor that we put in front of the square baler, and it's always been that way. We've never really had another tractor other than for the Super M, which we had before the M Diesel came on the farm, way back in the start. But this tractor's just always been on it, and it's always been really good at doing that task, and so we really kind of missed having it this year. We had to put our Farmall H, the first one that we had on the farm here. We had to put that on that square baler, and it just, well, the H's are perfectly capable of doing the hay baling job. It just isn't as good as using the M Diesel. The M Diesel, because it's a bigger tractor, it has more horsepower than the H does, and so it's just more well suited to the square baler. It would be nicer if it had a slower first gear for us, because our John Deere baler can't handle that, but hopefully someday I could remedy that by getting an international square baler. I'd really like to have one someday. But so that's what our current project is we have to go through and replace the rear main seal on this tractor. You can see here we went through and this is just currently mocked up. Nothing's tight. None of these bolts are tight. Nothing's welded. But what we did is we got this trailer, which you probably won't even be able to see, but it's on the outside there. Yeah, you guys can't even see it. Right at the tip of my finger it's pretty much at. Which is, I believe, an old grain hopper off of a pull-behind combine. Kind of something like our Alice Chalmers All-Crop 66 that we have. And we took the axle out from underneath it. That's what this is. We just unbolted the springs. You can see I still have the springs here. We unbolted the springs, from the trailer, and then we ended up taking the spring brackets, loose, whatever you want to call those, and pulled the springs off of it so that we just would have those out of the way. And because where the springs mounted here, let me get my light over here. Where these springs mounted, you can see that little where these pieces of angle iron come down to. They were perfect places to mount that angle iron. So we went through and removed the springs off of it, and we mounted up this. These both sides are pretty much the same. If I came over here, you'd be able to see that we've pretty much got the same concept. Well, it is the same concept, other than for this side's further out than that side is. We didn't quite get it perfectly on center. That doesn't really matter. But this is kind of stolen from an idea that a gentleman on Facebook, on the Farmall Restorations, Rebuilds, and Repairs Facebook page gave me. His was a little bit different setup, but he basically had the same concept. The only thing that I changed from his is that he had a sort of turnbuckle, almost looked like a top link from a 3-point going up here instead of a straight piece of angle iron. We went with that because this is pretty much going to be a one-time use, we're guessing. It's only going to be something for this tractor. We should never have to split, I hope anyways. Split another tractor, and even if we do, we can go with a more simpler setup unlike this. The reason why we're going with this is because the M Diesel tractors are a very top heavy engine. There's a lot of components to them. You can see the way the injectors are made. They're just a lot more top heavier compared to your regular Farmall M or Super M. So we went through and built this. It's still, of course, not, as I said, not finished. I have to go through and take our wire feed welder here, and I'm going to wire where we cut these to bend the angle iron, and I also have to weld down there to the axle. And then basically from there we can go through and tighten everything up and then work on splitting it. And when we go through to split it, another idea from him is take these 3/4 inch, I'm using grade 5, he didn't specify whether you had to have grade 5 or what, 3/4 inch by 8 inch long bolts. He said you probably could go longer or shorter, I'm not sure. Whoop, and then we almost drop it. And he said to cut the hex head off of the top and then round it off a bit, and then put that in place of where one of the bolts were in the, that goes into the bell housing here. He said to use the bottom ones, but because I don't feel like taking these fuel lines off to then have to reprime the fuel system and that, I'm going to use the top one on this side, and on the left side we'll go through and use the bottom one, because I had to take that oil filter should be an oil filter housing, and it's actually right down there that bolts up. You have to take that off in order to get at these bolts to take them off. So I'll use the bottom one on that one, and then I'm going to use the top one on this one. I don't think it should make a difference. And basically this is to help guide you out. Supposedly, if you do not support the rear engine plate, which you have your frame rail, there's a rear engine plate, and then you have your bell housing. He said that if you don't support the rear of the engine by putting some bolts through the rear plate, the front motor mounts will snap and you'll wind up with an engine on the ground. So this is basically to help you get the engine out far enough to be able to bolt the engine plate to the frame rail so that doesn't have any sort of vertical movement. So we'll have to go through and get these plates welded up, cut up, modify our bolt here so that we can use it as our sliding dowel, essentially is what it will become. And then we'll be pretty much ready to start loosening everything up and splitting the engine, or splitting the tractor into 2 pieces. So this is my first time doing a tractor, or splitting any sort of vehicle, we'll say, a tractor, any sort of machine. I've never done this before, so I'm kind of learning as we go on, and thanks to the help of Facebook and YouTube, it really makes things a lot easier for me. So we're going to go through, get this welded up, and then modify our bolts, and we'll be on our way to splitting our tractor here. So stay tuned, guys. Okay, hopefully we're going here. It's giving me the issue of the wire not shoving out, so we'll give it a shot here again. See what happens. Whoop. Alright, that's all we're going to show you of that, because this welding is terrible. Well, after some grueling efforts, and probably about an hour and a half, we're pretty somewhat stable, I'd say. I think things are going to be welded up enough to hold the tractor enough. I still have to tighten down that and the bolt in here. Yet I have the other side tightened down, and then we'll be on to working on our bolt. So I just wanted to share with you guys that we're all welded up here. Again, it's not the greatest job. It is, I can certainly say that. So it is not going to be, it's not the prettiest looking weld, but as I had shared with some friends of mine, it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be practical, and this is practical. You can see that everything's good and tight. So we should be getting the tractor split here in a matter of minutes, hopefully. So we'll talk to you when we're working on splitting it, I guess, maybe. And so here's what I come back to you with. We have two grade 5, and I probably, if you don't have a sort of gravity fed bandsaw, or that's what I ended up doing on this. I tried using, we have a Sawzall, and that was cutting through these very slowly. The bandsaw cut through these really, really fast. You can actually see right on that one where I stopped with the Sawzall and started with the whatchamacallit, the bandsaw. But we cut the heads off. We rounded the edge, I guess you will call it, the edge off of them, as I was informed or told to do, instructed, there we go, that's the word I'm thinking of, instructed to do. So now what we'll do is we'll stick one of these in here and one on the other side. Now one thing that I didn't do with these that I was told to do was to drill he said to drill a 1/4 inch hole so that you could put a punch through and turn these in. I'm not gonna do that. I put in, where do you go here? I brought in a vice grip to turn these in. I think that'll work just as good compared to doing the punch, and it might just simplify my life a little bit. So I'm sure you could do it either way. This is just the way I'm gonna go. So we'll get these in, and then we'll work on taking the last bolts out. I gotta take the gas line off here for the carburetor, and then we'll be pulling the M Diesel apart. Well guys, it's the next day, and I hate to break it to you, but I got it split off camera, and you can see I even took out the pressure plate too. This thing was really fighting me really badly. I was out here till about 11 o'clock last night trying to get it split. It just was not wanting to split apart for me. So I went to bed. I came back now this afternoon after morning school, and I'm still kind of on the clock, but I'm working on this instead of my schoolwork. And I don't know how I really got it split apart. I pulled out the starter to see if I could see something. It was off of the input shaft. There was thought of maybe the input shaft was being bound. I don't know what ended up getting it. I put a different block under my jack there, because the one I had was kind of crushing apart, and it really looked pretty sad. So I put a different block on. I jacked it up a little bit, gave it a roll, and it was coming apart. So I just continued right on with it. So you can see we got our pressure plate out and our clutch disc. The clutch disc is pretty bad looking. It looks like it's been grinding on the rivets, sort of. So the clutch disc definitely needed to be replaced. We were definitely getting to that point, it looks like. You can see there's not a whole lot left. Let's see, can you see? Let's see if I can get you. You can see there's not a whole lot left. That center line is the actual inner part, and then the outer bit is the lining. It's not terrible. It probably could go for a little while yet, but we're starting to grind on the rivets, so that's not good. The really disappointing fact though here is we got a lot of heat cracking on our flywheel. That's not good. Sometimes you can get that resurfaced and have a nice good smooth flywheel again, but we might possibly be looking at finding a new flywheel, which is rather saddening, or kind of a disappointing find, because that's a lot of money. And then we have the possibility of needing to get the ring gear off too, and that was not really something I wanted to have to mess with at all. But we'll see what Dad has to come up with, what he says, what his thoughts are. But now I have to go through and take off these fold-over locks that are on, that hold the bolts. These fold-over locks, for those of you that don't know, they keep the bolt from turning. So you take this, you take this metal bit here, and you can see they have it folded up against your bolt. That's what I'm trying to think of. And basically what that is supposed to do is it keeps the bolt from turning out on its own. So as a tractor vibrates and that from its imperfections and stuff, these locks will keep those bolts from trying to turn out and wind up with a catastrophic failure in the bell housing. The bell housing is very greasy, as you can see, but that's kind of that's a good sign. You want to see greased. It would be quite bad if that was very, very dry. Of course, it's not good that we have oil in it, which is the reason why we have this split apart, because of that rear main seal. But we'll work on getting these fold-over locks bent down and then taking off those bolts, and then the flywheel will come off. And then we can see our rear main seal and see that is whether that is the old style of the felt with the felt, or if it is the new style with the rubber halves. And if it's the new style, we're kind of in trouble, because nobody makes those rubber seals anymore. They are out of production. Nobody, your best bet of it would be to find new old stock, and that's rather difficult. And actually, there's a guy on the tractor pages that has kind of exhausted his new old stock resources, I guess. So we're kind of SOL if it's rubber. But we'll get this flywheel off and find out if we have bad or good news. So stay tuned. Well, it's much later in the day. I had to go and do another task, and I apologize, but I went through and took off the flywheel. I ended up having to go borrow Cody, the friend who sold us the what do you call it, governor housing for Cushing H, or Farmall H. I had to go borrow his electric impact, and then I had to in order to get the flywheel bolts loose here, there's 4 of them in the center, in order to hold them, get them loose, and it had to sit on the charger, his battery, and that took about an hour. So that was a bit of time, but I figured that I would film here. I've gotten all the bolts loose for the top half of the oil seal, whatever you want to call it, housing, holder, retainer. That's what the actual name is for it. That's what I've been trying to think of. And so I figured I'd save the big moment. I believe, based off of our part number on the front, which is in between these 2 bolt holes, you might be able to see it if you have a wide screen. I'm not too sure if you can see it currently, but there's all the short bolts out. Now we have these 2 sort of longer bolts. Everything's very oily. It's kind of rather annoying, because I continuously get my hands full of oil, and I don't entirely enjoy that, but I'm not complaining. Well, I guess I kind of am. But one more long bolt here, and then that's the big reveal of whether we can actually fix this or not, and I'm pretty sure that we can. Let me grab my tiny pry bar here. There he goes. He's loose. Here's the big moment. There it is. Felt. There's a felt seal in there. We're lucky. We're saved. Ooh, that's very good. That's very good news. Yeah, that seal is junk. Junk. It's ripping out of there. I should have a screwdriver, and I actually do have a screwdriver in here, over here. So yeah, we are lucky. Let me see if I can set you guys somewhere here. I'll sit you on my leg. How about that? And we'll get the seal pulled out of here, so you guys can see that this is just made out of kind of really a fabric material. Sorry for the wobbling. My leg is not magnetic, so the magnetic hold down doesn't. But yeah, you can see how that is just, that felt seal is just ripping itself away, and that's not good. That means that it is extremely dried up, and it's just, it's done. It's no longer able to serve its purpose. So we will go through and order the kit that Steiner sells. It is the oil seal kit. It comes with, and I'll pull you off so you quit wobbling all over the place. It comes with 2 felts, one for the upper that we just pulled it out of, and one for the lower. It comes with this gasket here, as well as there's another identical one on the opposite side. It comes with a gasket, I believe, for the bottom of this. Now, the only unfortunate thing about this is I believe we have to pull the oil pan in order to get that off, and I really don't care to do that, but it's just something that we have to do, I do believe. So I'm going to go through and do that. Oh, and another thing it comes with is, you can see there's a gasket right there that goes up against the back of the engine block that also seals that seals the housing to the engine block. So there's our good news. We got good news. We got pardon me, we're burping up my dinner here. We have the an oil seal that we're able to replace, and a clutch disc that we're going to replace, as well as Steiner sells a whole kit of, it comes with the clutch disc, the pressure plate, your input bearing, I believe, in there, and also or no, that's not the input bearing. I'm not sure what they call that bearing. I believe that one up in the bell housing is the input bearing, which you can just barely, come on wires, you can just barely see the shine of it there. That one up in the bell housing, I believe, is the input bearing. They sell a whole kit. It comes with the tool and stuff for a few $100. So we'll probably go through and get that, put a new clutch in it. We'll have to get the flywheel resurfaced because of the little bit of heat cracking that it has inside of it. Hopefully it's not too far gone that we're unable to do that. I really don't know. It to me looks like it won't be fixable, but I'm by no means any mechanic, so my opinion here really doesn't mean anything. So I'll go through and get that other half of the rear main oil seal retainer off, and yeah, that's some really good news that we lucked out and are able to go through and replace the seal. We don't have the newer style rubber one, which would make it essentially impossible to replace because nobody makes them anymore. And there's talks of them making it again, but we really just don't know. And until one starts being made, it's kind of an unknown and really bad situation for those who aren't as lucky as we are here. So I'll go through and finish up taking things apart and get stuff ready for going home, or I should say bringing inside and cleaning up and getting ready for a reinstallation. And I'll go through and get on the computer tonight and try and get some parts ordered so we can get this thing back together here, hopefully within a week, whenever Steiner is going to sell us our parts. So I guess stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we're going to end it here. So as I slowly fall over, thanks for watching. Thanks for staying tuned. And let's get the old girl going again. We'll talk to you guys all next time.